The Rhodesian Bush War, also known as the Second Chimurenga or Zimbabwe War of Liberation, was one of Africa's most complex and brutal conflicts. It began in 1964 and lasted until 1979, though by 1978, the war had reached its most intense and defining stage. At the heart of the conflict was the struggle between the white minority, government of Rhodesia led by Ian Smith, and African nationalist movements demanding independence, equality, and the right to majority rule. The roots of the war go back to 1965, when Smith's government declared unilateral independence from Britain. Britain refused to recognize Rhodesia as a legitimate state because of its racial policies, and African nationalist groups began organizing armed resistance. Two main liberation movements emerged: ZANU, led by Robert Mugabe, with its military wing ZANLA, and ZAPU, led by Joshua Nkomo, with its military wing, ZIPRA. These groups launched guerrilla warfare from bases in Mozambique and Zambia. The Rhodesian government relied on its well-trained military, the Rhodesian Army and elite units, like the Silu Scouts, and the Rhodesian Light Infantry. They used counterinsurgency tactics, air power, and cross-border raids to try to crush the guerrillas. Yet the liberation forces fought with determination, blending into rural communities, recruiting villagers, and gaining international support from countries such as the Soviet Union, China, and frontline African states. By the mid-1970s, the war had escalated. Rural areas became battle zones. Civilians were caught between guerrilla forces and government troops, and propaganda was used heavily on both sides. The liberation fighters adopted hit-and-run attacks, landmine warfare, and ambushes, while Rhodesian forces responded with brutal reprisals and raids into neighboring countries. Internationally, Rhodesia was under sanctions, isolated from most of the world. However, it managed to survive with covert support from countries like South Africa and Portugal, which controlled Mozambique until 1975. But when Mozambique gained independence, ZANLA gained free access to operate from its territory, giving the war new momentum. By 1978, the Rhodesian government was weakening under pressure. The guerrilla forces had grown in numbers. Morale was declining within Rhodesia, and the world was demanding a political settlement. That year, an internal agreement was signed to create a biracial government. But the war continued because the liberation movements rejected it, insisting on full independence. The Rhodesian Bush War was not only a military struggle, but also a war of ideology, propaganda, and survival. It shaped the destiny of Zimbabwe, which would be born in 1980 after a negotiated peace at the Lancaster House talks.